Panhandle Live on 93.7 and 1340 WEPM. It's Black Friday. Hope you're saving some time and money to go over to Small Business Saturday. American Express started that tradition about 8 years ago, and downtowns across West Virginia, certainly here in the Eastern Panhandle, are getting ready to celebrate. We're not necessarily celebrating the demise of net neutrality regulations. They were, as I mentioned before, designed to prevent internet service providers from favoring some sites and apps over others. It could change the way the internet operates. There are proponents of this say that the naysayers are highly exaggerating any changes, that it's really not going to make a huge difference to the average consumer. There are others who think that it is going to be the end of the free internet. Brad Hopkins is the owner of Firebrand Media, and he's joining us this morning to talk about net neutrality. Brad, thanks for taking time to come and be on the show.
Yeah, good morning. Black Friday, where else was it going to be?
I know, right? Yes, this or shopping.
Yeah.
Talk a bit, first of all, Firebrand Media, what do you do?
Primarily we do web development, web applications. Really now any website is really a web application, so that's our big thing.
When you say an application, that's the app.
Yeah, well, an application, more like, not necessarily an app on your phone, but, you know, a website does more than just host static pages. Now. It's more like a database-driven, content's constantly being updated. It's connected into a bunch of different services, so the days of just a static website are, you know, pretty much over.
And that's actually interesting because it talks about, it points to the way we consume information now. The average American spends 10 hours a day consuming media. Most of that is done online, and they go to sites that are regularly updated, that are interesting, that are interactive. If you're putting up a WordPress that has just, you know, here's what we're about, and that doesn't change for 6 months,
right,
it doesn't do what it's supposed to do.
No, it does. Yeah, I mean, people expect your website to be current and updated frequently. If not, you know, they're moving on to somebody else that is presenting their business in a better light.
And it's got to be ready to go on multiple platforms now. It used to be, you know, the era of the desktop computer. You had a website, that was it. Now, tablet, mobile phone. You've got to be able to have a website that'll work on any of them, and you don't want it to just look like a big jumble when you open it up on the phone.
Right, yeah, and we call that responsive design. And so that's just a term that your website responds based on the device that you're viewing it with, whether it's, you know, a mobile phone up to, you know, a 20-inch display, or maybe someday it's going to be your, you know, like a refrigerator or, you know, display or whatever.
Have you seen that stuff yet?
Yeah,
in the showroom, it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, I'm not totally against it. So.
Smart houses are way beyond. Well, so and you look at how it's permeating everything we do, from Alexa to Google Home to where you're just talking, and it's Star Trek-esque and it sounds fun. Right now, you know, for me to say, "Hey Google, what's it like outside?" It's sunny. Oh, great! Right. Or I could look out the window. Right. Not such a big deal. Eventually, though, if it's, you know, I'm at the store and I can take my phone and Google, "Do I have milk?" No. Okay, that's kind of cool, but it's such an intrusion.
Oh, right. Everything. I mean, you know, it's a lot of power. With great power comes great responsibility, like Uncle Ben always said.
Nice Spider-Man reference.
Yeah, right. So yeah, there's a lot coming. So there's a lot of decisions we have to make. Like how much do you want AI, artificial intelligence, listening? You know, how much control do you want to cede to Google and Amazon?
Anyone who grew up in the 90s and knows what Skynet is doesn't like the idea of artificial intelligence, and we're seeing it come to be. It's, you know, what is it? There's a machine that beats a human, and I don't remember if it was chess or what game it was, but some strategy game that now can beat a human. Was never taught anything except the basic rules.
It was Go? Was it
Yeah.
Which is a very complicated game. Yeah.
There's some scary stuff coming, but back to net neutrality. As you said, just the basic decisions that need to be made are, how do we regulate the internet? Right now, the government has restrictions for utilities, water, electricity. They recognize that people need to have access to those things, and that we don't have to pay a premium to have better access. Say, oh, you're bottom tier, you only get, you know, 12 hours of electricity a day. This person gets 24 because they pay more money. It's, here's your rate based on your use. Internet has sort of they haven't quite figured it out yet, because there's these big providers, right, like Comcast, Verizon, AT&T, and do they own the web? Do they control the web, or is it something that the infrastructure? What's the deal?
Right. So they're more the public base, right? I mean, there's the whole infrastructure behind them, And so this net neutrality really applies to the internet service providers like Comcast. And so, yeah, that's.
So like
that's
if I have Comcast at my house, and we did that because they are the really only option for high-speed internet where we live. There's some other options that don't, the air quotes high-speed internet, but it's not. So I'm over a barrel. If they came to me, and I stream a lot of content.
Right.
One of the concerns I would have immediately is if Comcast said, hey, we're gonna launch our own streaming service, and we're gonna charge you $50 a month for it. And I said, thanks, no thanks. I'll stick with Netflix. And they said, that's fine, but we're only going to allow Netflix to have about 2 megabytes per second, so they're not really going to be able to be used at all. Is that a danger?
Oh yeah, that's definitely the danger. I mean, that's what we're looking at. So the net neutrality guidelines basically say ISPs, internet service providers, can't block content, they can't throttle content, and they can't prioritize content. They also need to be transparent with how they manage their network speeds. So this is what we're rolling back, all of that. So now they have the freedom to block content, or they will. I don't expect that they would, but who knows? And that's the whole thing, is like, who knows? They could throttle content. Like you said, Netflix only gets 2 meg downstream.
Which means you can't watch it. It's
Right.
useless. You can pay for it, you can have it, but you're not going to be able to watch it.
Right, and so then they'll also have the ability to prioritize content where maybe they're going to prioritize Netflix, but de-emphasize or limit, throttle Hulu. Okay, so I mean that's really what we're talking about by rolling back these net neutrality regulations.
We're talking this morning with Brad Hopkins. He's the owner at Firebrand Media. I'm Hans Fogle. This is Panhandle Live. So with net neutrality, all we can do is speculate at this point, because pre-2015, before net neutrality went in, we had the Wild West in terms of, and you could see them kind of feeling it out. First, does the FCC have jurisdiction? Who's going to regulate this? Should it go under Title I? All these questions.
Right.
And finally they come out with net neutrality. But you would see things like, there was a Pearl Jam concert, I think it was Verizon, maybe AT&T. One of the two had the streaming rights to it, but they killed the audio because he was saying controversial stuff about President Bush. So, okay, is that cool, or is that an infringement on free speech? Do they own that? Is it the internet's? So there's questions about what content will we have access to. Right. Literally, will they, okay, we don't like Fox News, so we're not going to let any of their stories go through.
Yeah, and so real examples, right? That's what we're looking for, real examples. And real examples are why we now have net neutrality, like the Pearl Jam thing, or I believe one of the internet service providers, I don't think it was Comcast, it may have been AT&T, was blocking or throttling peer-to-peer.
Oh, the BitTorrents.
Yeah, the BitTorrents. Yeah. And so really all of these sort of principles of net neutrality came about because of things like that. It was just that in 2015, it was all sort of, that's when the FCC declared the internet a public utility, which brought it under stricter jurisdiction, or their jurisdiction.
And when you look at the way the internet's used, okay, if you're shopping online, all right, you could argue that that's certainly not a necessity, and you may not need high speed for that, so okay. Cyber Monday folks will argue with you that you want to be quick, but overall you could say, yeah, that's not a necessity, or Netflix is not a necessity. But when you're talking about research papers, or in our community, working from home, imagine if they throttled back your speed to the point that you were unable to log into the office and you started to have to make your daily commute. That's a standard of living issue. I mean, there are some real world scenarios that could happen that aren't really all that far-fetched.
Right, and I think one of the problems is that there's just the total lack of competition. Especially in West Virginia, in this area, like you said, we only have Comcast as a viable high-speed provider. And because of that, we're basically at their mercy. So whatever they decide to do with their network, we either pay it or we,
suffer the consequences.
Yeah, I mean, we say, okay, well, we're not going to, and it's funny, because they already have tiers, right? I mean, they already have speed tiers.
Sure. You can buy, what is it, the highest package. That, and interestingly, you buy that, and it may not even be available in your area, right. But you pay basically to get as good as you can possibly get.
Yeah, you're going to get the max.
Right. Well, and I've got, so you run a speed test, and it'll say you're buying 80 megabytes a second, and it comes up to 50. You call and say, hey, what gives? after you get through the press 1.
Right.
So they finally get through, they take your account number 4 times, and you get a live person who says, yeah, we don't actually offer 80 in your area. And I'll say, then why am I paying for 80?
Right.
So if I say, what if I take it back to 50? Well, it's up to 50. So now I'm at 30. So, you know, where do you draw the line?
Yeah, and that's the problem. We don't, we don't know.
The other concern, and you look at someone like Comcast, they have other interests. So it's not just, they're not just a pure internet provider. They also have cable, telephone, cell phones. I mean, so they do these bundle packages, and everyone has dealt with them on this and scratched their heads as to how that actually works. But they're going to be able to use their internet service provider status to leverage some of these other options as well, potentially.
Potentially, and that's, you know, that's what makes this all seem just, you know, the antithesis of like the American way, right? We want open competition, we want free competition, but we want it, you know, we want it to be fair, and so, you know, without actually digging into it, you know, a lot of people would say I'm against total government regulation, right? Get the less government involved in my life, the better. The less government, these are the consequences of less government, and you know, at least less oversight,
Right.
And less regulations around, something that we all like. It's not water, it's not air, but man, for a lot of people, it feels like it is.
And if you take it away or restrict it, it's not just about taking it away. We're not necessarily talking about losing it. We're talking about a company telling you how you can utilize this service. And when I talked about logging in from home, for example, they wouldn't necessarily say, well, no one's going to log into Firebrand Media from work from home. That's ridiculous.
Right.
But if the software that you use hasn't paid the premium to Comcast, and Comcast said, we're going to limit their bandwidth to the point that you can't use it, well, then what? Are you going to be forced to their brand of it? I mean, and that's the concern. Now the companies, the big telecom companies say that they don't like these regulations because they can undermine investment in broadband and, you know, the infrastructure that comes with it, and that's significant. And they say that the regulations introduce uncertainty about acceptable business practices. Now, I'm a novice on all of this stuff, but I get the sense that it actually would give more certainty to have regulation to say you can do this, you can do this, you can't do this. Again, I'll use the term wild, wild west. Without net neutrality, it seems sort of like just try it. It's all sort of fair game.
Yeah, I think statistically, if you look at from 2015 till now, there was a drop in investment in infrastructure by telecoms. And so I think they're kind of pointing to that, saying, hey, you know, we're uncertain about it, and so we're not investing in it. If you give us the freedom to charge Netflix for, you know, priority access, or charge Google for priority access, or whatever the next big thing is, then we can build up our system to make it, you know, a more viable system for 3D or for VR or AR, or, you know, some of these things that are coming down the line that are really data intensive.
What's AR?
So augmented reality. So it's where
Okay.
you like point your phone at something and you see something that's not actually there. Kind of like Pokemon Go.
Yikes, but
Yeah.
like even more.
Right, and so yeah, these are really data intensive things, and so, you know, having more bandwidth would be better.
It's like the holodeck eventually. We're getting there.
Oh yeah.
Another Star Trek
Yeah.
geek reference for everybody. Brad Hopkins with us this morning, Firebrand Media. So Pi distributed an alternative plan to the FCC on Tuesday. They've got a December 14th vote. It was along party lines last time, but Republicans dominate 3-2. The Democrats on that committee are going to vote against it, they've said. Net neutrality advocates say that undoing the rules is going to make it harder for the government to crack down on internet providers who act against consumer interests and harm innovation. That's the other thing too, is the idea of if Firebrand came out with a unique app and thought, wow, this is really cool, it's going to really change the way small businesses work, and Comcast basically said you can sell it to us, we'd be glad to utilize that.
Right.
Or go ahead and launch it yourself, but
Yeah,
good
you're gonna have a really narrow pipe to run your data through. That's possible, and the funny thing is, we see examples of this already. I mean, like, we have basically the internet and technology is dominated by what, four players: Amazon, Google, Facebook, Apple.
Mhm.
So those are like the big four of the internet. And so there's already sort of this anti-competitive spirit out there because they're such well-capitalized companies that anything that comes along, they can hold it off for long enough that they can either copy it, buy it, or create their own version of it. You look at like Snapchat. Snapchat was an innovative thing, and then Facebook was kind of like, hey, that's cool. We have Instagram. Let's build in Instagram stories. And so Snapchat's user base has basically, their growth numbers have sort of plateaued because the network effect of Instagram and Facebook. Why try something new when I can get it in an app that I've already got?
Well, and you look at, and I'm trying to think, Periscope.
Right.
So Facebook Live. There's Periscope now.
Yeah, there's you look at Google has favored their own results in searches. They were hitting the EU, finding the EU for these kinds of things. And so there's a lot of anti-competitiveness already built into the system. We don't need more with an internet service provider willing to take money from a Facebook, a Netflix, to sort of maintain that position of advantage that they've already got because they've got so much money and so many users already. So where does the next Netflix come from? Where does the next Facebook or Google come from? There's really no environment. There's no area for them to sort of disrupt because they're so well capitalized, and now the system is really in their favor because they can pay to have all of the advantages.
Brad Hopkins with us this morning from Firebrand Media. We're going to talk more about net neutrality as we continue with Panhandle Live. Don't go anywhere. So Netflix says that they're not too worried about it because they're so popular, they can't really be interfered with. And it's like, it's funny you think that, because honestly, if your price jacked up to $20 a month, I'd have to seriously consider whether I was doing it.
Right.
You know?
And I think, I wonder if there's going to be if there would be, so first, do the tech companies, like they're totally against this, right?
Right.
Do they reject it and just totally like not buy into the whole priority fast lane access, right? Could they sort of collude to not say, hey, we're not going to get in this and make it a big public thing about it?
Right.
And also, is there going to be some campaign to shun companies that do?
Yeah.
Right? Like, why wouldn't you shun Netflix for, basically it's like, we're going to abstain from this whole system.
Right.
What happens then?
Right. Yeah, how would that work? Because so Comcast has power, but so too does Google.
Right.
And if Google said, that's great, we're not gonna be on Comcast. How about that? We're gonna, anytime it's a Comcast IP,
we're gonna block it.
Yeah.
And so, yes,
So Comcast, you do it all you want, but your customers will no longer have access to a Google search.
Right.
Enjoy.
Yeah, so how does that work? I mean, so
and then does Microsoft step up and say, bing, hey,
yeah, right. And so it's greed that's, greed is the whole thing.
And that's why it's important to not be about that. It's already bad enough. So if I wanted my Panhandle Live to be the top search for talk show, if I have enough money, I could do that already.
Yeah.
But at least that's a search, and the other stuff's still available. And it's not like if they click on somebody else's show, they can't stream it.
Right.
Because that's a whole other thing. Finding me first is huge. Not having access to the other stuff is bigger.
Right.
Either it doesn't show up at all, or if you do go to listen to it, you can't download it.
Right. Like, you can pay to get yourself up. You can't necessarily pay to push them down.
Right, right. There's still
That's a big difference.
This is Panhandle Live on Black Friday. Brad Hopkins is with us this morning. He is from Firebrand Media. He and I are talking about a vote coming up with the FCC, and I think it's the FCC commissioners. 2 Democrats, 3 Republicans will be voting December the 14th on a proposal from Chairman Ajit Pai about rolling back the net neutrality regulations, an Obama-era set of rules that basically levels the playing field on the internet. Internet service providers, Comcast, AT&T, Verizon, they are not allowed to pick and choose who does and does not get internet data access. They can't say, well, we like Amazon Prime today, we're going to let them stream, we're not going to let Netflix stream. The concern is, of course, that a company like Netflix, and they've said, this is interesting, Netflix has said that they support the rules. Weaker net neutrality won't hurt them, though, because they say they're too popular with users for broadband providers to interfere with. And true to an extent that I think there would be a lot of upset if something like Netflix went away. At the same time, Comcast could say, we're willing to do that because we can offer an alternative, and we're just going to make you raise your rates. Because anything that they charge Netflix extra is just going to get passed on.
Oh, right, yeah. And so that's That's the whole problem with this, is that eventually the consumer pays for it, right? The cost goes to Netflix, they pass it on to us, So to me, this whole thing about more opportunity or cheaper prices for consumers, I don't see it.
I don't see how that would happen.
Right.
If anything, I would see the opposite. And then what about someone like you who develops web apps and websites? Your cost would potentially go up, or how would it change for you in terms of what you can offer customers?
Right, so for customers, yeah. So if I had a customer that had a video intensive application, it's possible that they could, for priority access, but honestly, at my level, I'm probably not going to run into that.
Is that just because of scale?
Yeah, just because of scale. Now, if I were on a project that that had broad reach, regionally, East Coast, nationally, worldwide, then you start running into issues about priority access. How do we get priority access from Comcast? How do we get it, and from AT&T, whichever network? And that's another thing. Is like, so now so we're talking about Comcast because we have Comcast. So is Netflix going to have to pay Comcast, AT&T, every one of these major internet service providers?
Right.
How is that going to work? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like, it's just money, going out the door. And so as a small business, and small business is whatever it is, but if I have a product that I'm launching, it's video intensive, I need priority access on all of these internet service providers, yeah, I'm going to have to pay for priority access.
Which is, and again, access. Already there's, and we sort of alluded to this, Google searches, you can pay to prioritize geofencing, you can get specific areas around a school or a library or something. But when you start to look at being able to actually get something versus find something, there's a difference. And we were talking off air a bit, we used this talk show as an example. I could pay, if I had some money, to have Panhandle Live pop up as the number, if you typed in radio talk show in Google, Panhandle Live could pop up the first 5 things. But you could still scroll down and find, what's a little show, Wrestling Ball.
Yeah,
People listen
something small that no one's
but
ever
but if they said, not only are we going to find you first, but you can't even access the other guy, his
Right.
website won't even load, that's a big difference.
That is, yeah, and that gets to the whole point of blocking, throttling, blocking, giving priority access. That's what we're talking about. The anti-competitive market that we're sort of creating here by creating different tiers of access or speed. Yeah.
There's also the concern that it's sort of going to be a toothpaste out of the tube. Once it goes this way, how do you roll it back? And because that, once you grant it, it's hard to sometimes come back around again with a new administration or a new sort of, oh wow, the consequences from this aren't very good. Now we have to start putting on restrictions.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't think so in this case, because to me, from what I've read, this has become more of a political football. It's like the previous administration said these are the rules. FCC, is in charge. We're going to declare it a utility. 3 years later, the rules are changing again.
Not a utility anymore.
Right, it's not a utility. It's under the FCC and the FTC, and we're just, we're gonna. It's wide open, but we're really gonna, regulate you and make sure, or not regulate, but we're gonna watch you to make sure that it's not an anti-competitive marketplace. But so I feel like the next administration, they're just gonna roll it back, and until Congress actually codifies this with law, I feel like it's just gonna keep going back and forth.
And even then, they can
Well,
always
yeah,
undo it.
Yeah, because there's going to be lawsuits. This is not, like, this vote is not the end. I mean, there will be lawsuits related to this as it progresses.
And I think more will spawn because you are going to see things pop up that all of a sudden we're going to say, is that best business practices? Is that reasonable? Is it fair? And, I'm interested too because when you start to see which companies side where, as you said, are we going to start to see Google, Facebook, are they all just going to collude and say, we're not going to participate here?
Right, and that's the thing. They have a lot of power in the market. If you're Netflix, if you're Hulu, if you're Google, if you're Amazon, could you opt out of this whole priority access? I mean, just because a business like Comcast offers you priority access, if you feel like it's anti-open internet and anti, what the internet was founded on, you have the right to opt out of it and not pay for priority access. And to me, that seems like if they really believe this is a chance for them to put their money where their mouth is and not buy into the whole system. Because once they start buying into it, it's money. That's money Comcast they see coming in. So to me that it's like it's over once they sort of buy into it.
There's consumer concerns and business concerns, also free speech concerns. Will certain news sites be regulated or again, stripped of their ability to share a lot of data? I mean, there's, fake news. Believe me, that people are talking about a lot of different angles here. Right now, the vote is coming up December 14th. You can make your voice heard by reaching out to some of the members of that commission.
Yeah, there's a website called battleforthenet.com, and on that website, it makes it really easy to write your congressman, or to attend a protest, or make a phone call. So battleforthenet.com.
Battleforthenet.com. Brad, we really do appreciate your time. Firebrand Media, what's your website?
Firebrand.media or inthepanhandle.com.
Firebrand.media or inthepanhandle.com. Really do appreciate you taking time out of your Thanksgiving holiday.
Oh, I'm going to go shopping now.
And don't forget to shop tomorrow for Small Business Saturday. This is WEPM Martinsburg Talk Line with Hoppy Kirchhoff up right after Fox News. Have a great weekend.